Hello and welcome to this afternoon's podcast. My name is Maura Mckibbin. I am an independent family mediator. I work with couples who have separated and are planning life after separation. So my job is to keep people out of court and to support parents to make plans for their children and to help people to reorganise financial life to represent a separated situation. That's a tall order for anybody who's facing a separated situation. And then we bring in and layer onto the top of that COVID-19, which has thrown everybody in all sorts of different ways. And we are all working with additional challenges. And for families facing separation, that is absolutely the case for them too. So this afternoon, I'm going to be talking alongside Lindsay George, who will introduce herself shortly. We're going to be talking about how families can work together, how couples can try to get through these tough times and find solutions working together with support. So I'll pass over to Lindsay to introduce herself.
Thanks, Maura. Hi, I'm Lindsay George. I'm an experienced counsellor and psychotherapist. I work with young people, adults, couples and families, and most of the time I offer online as normal for working alongside people. And so today we're using Zoom, which I guess is part and parcel of where we all are in relation to social distancing. And I'm delighted to be here with Maura today to try and work through this very difficult process around separation and divorce and how you can survive that in this present climate.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we're going to run a series of these podcasts, in fact, and this is our first one. And we want to try and pick a theme for each one, which we think might be helpful to anyone who's listening and facing the sort of issues that we're going to talk about. And one of the themes that Lindsay and I discussed, which is gigantic for people who are separating, whose relationships have run into difficulties, is the emotion of trust and mistrust. And when people reach out to us at the point of separation, they are very often dealing with enormously bruised or broken trust. And they are then trying to work together to find solutions. And we are working, Lindsay and I, often working as a team to try and help support people who are catering for bruised or broken trust and thinking, how on earth are we going to sort this out when we can't trust each other personally, as parents, financially? So what are we going to do here, because we really want to get solutions and we can't. So just to think that through with you, Lindsay, so imagining, say, a couple are coming to me for family mediation, or thinking about family mediation as a way to problem solve their way through, but they've got this real challenge about trust and mistrust. If I'm thinking with clients about different routes forward and that way of working together, I'm often saying to them, look, it would be a good idea to prepare emotionally for what's ahead and think about sorts of emotions that are going to crop up for you. In your practice, Lindsay, how do you tackle this emotion with clients who are going to want to try and work together to try and find solutions and sort things out after separation?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really big process, and I think this is part and parcel of why this particular process of separation is probably seen as the most difficult, because we've got two people, potentially a family, and the two people that are separating are often coming to, at this point, at very different points within the separation process. So one person might have already decided that they were going to leave and has decided to leave the wife or the husband, and so therefore they will have gone through a myriad of emotional emotions up until that point. Once making that decision, they almost are more in control of the process. It's the person that is having it done to them and feels out of control that I often find myself needing to support more within this kind of rupture that clearly is part of the separation process with couples. So it's often that person that needs more support in relation to their repairing some of these difficult emotions that they're feeling hurt and can't even get past the stage of actually what is happening. And sometimes it can be a huge shock for people to, you know, find themselves in this situation where it's being done to them. So when couples come to me, and it's often one couple that will lead the situation, I always ask the question, why now? Sometimes it is about separating couples and having a better relationship as far as communication, but at some point it may well be that I work individually with maybe one client to provide them a little bit more support so that they can start to talk about some of these difficult emotions and allow them to process those, so that then they can come back to you and actually hear what it is that you're trying to guide them through, because often we don't hear things when we're in that difficult hurting place, and we often want to create barriers and not be part of it.
Yeah, and I think that that's really on point. The point you make about one of a separating couple being much further ahead emotionally than the other plays an enormous part in whether people trust a process like mediation to help them to get through it, because they're already feeling the one that's further behind. It doesn't mean that either of them doesn't have all of the range of emotions for separation, of course, but one person might have been processing those privately for a very long time before communicating it to the other. And then it's right that often, for me, there's one person who is feeling much more vulnerable emotionally and much less trusting and in shock, as you say. So supporting that person a bit more at that stage to give them the confidence to, I suppose, go ahead and trust a process where they're going to be working with others supporting them, like us, and with their former partner to do problem solving work. So it's absolutely relevant and pertinent. And I think for those listening to this broadcast, I think that you're in a situation where you're at a crossroads, aren't you? And you're trying to work out, well, which is the right path. And people anecdotally know a lot about separation and divorce from things they see on TV, things they read, friends. But actually, when it comes to them and making decisions for their path forward, they've got a number of options. And so we're often helping them at the beginning to think about, well, how can I move forward with all of these emotions around me? So for me, pretty much every time with couples who are coming to explore family mediation, it's tough mediation, it's demanding emotionally, and having the confidence as a practitioner to be able to say to people, look, go to Lindsay, this is going to be challenging emotionally. We know that before we start. Add in that extra layer, because if you can get more emotional support in place at a time when you are in a very mistrustful, fearful, scared place, that can help enormously. And I think, really, for me, it's actually, really accentuating and emphasizing to people who feel very scared, we can add in this extra emotional support, by working alongside with Lindsay. You will feel more robust and more able to tackle all of the reorganizing that you've got to do as parents, personally, socially, financially. There's so much, isn't there, that people have to tackle when they're going through separation.
And often, sorry, Maura, I think often this process, it creates a feeling of being stuck, as in feeling quite paralyzed with making decisions, because when you're in shock, it's very difficult to feel in control of decision making. We call this limbo period, where we don't know which way to go. And actually, how do you trust in professionals that you don't know? I guess part of the purpose of doing this today is to try and put faces to names to professions, so that people can feel less fearful of the types of people that they may well encounter if they do go to mediation or they do go to counselling and they try and get some help, because actually trying to put a friendly face behind those professions is really part of the process we're trying to get across today. And I think this feeling of not knowing whether you can actually trust the process, because actually you don't know the person that is taking you through it, and that's yourself and myself. And it's very difficult, isn't it, to then, you know, expect for two strangers potentially to go into your office and start working with you when they haven't got a relationship of trust with you to begin with. So there's quite a lot that you have to do and I have to do to gain, obviously, clients' trust in the first place.
Yeah,
With
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's, I'm sure, one of the most scary and terrifying times of life, you know, particularly if you think about parents and thinking about, you know, the situation we're in at the moment. People are locked down. That brings a lot of fear. There's fear anyway for separating families and couples. And where people are needing to get, you know, let's say help with, if parents have run into a disagreement about how their children move between them, or something to do with this COVID-19 situation we find ourselves dealing with, some families need help quite quickly. And so they're having to get that professional support and help in place quite quickly. It's a time when trust is low, it's a time when worry and fear is high. And so being able to deal with professionals who are going to make it feel more manageable and give people the reassurance, the acknowledgement of how hard all of it is, and the reassurance that, and the hope that actually, yes, you can sort this out. Trust in me to guide you through this, because this is a process I've done many times before, not with you, but I'm going to get to know you and your needs, and I know the process. And if we put those together, then that's going to be a winning formula for people. And I think team working across professionals is incredibly important, because we've got very different skill sets, haven't we? And I need your skill set to help people at the very beginning of the process, and actually as they're going through it. So it is getting the right person at the right time in place to give the help as well, I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree. And obviously in relation to outside of the couple, there is obviously the children, if there are children involved, to try and find a way through. How do you know, what words do you use to tell the children, depending on the age and stage of the child? What do you need to tell the child, and at what stage of the process do you tell your children that you're going to be separating, when you know there's going to be emotional fallout with that? And I guess this is again, you know, around the sort of support that we can offer, because having had experience and many years of trying to manage this very difficult process, you're aware of the impact of children only too well, and how that can affect their world and their sense of security and their sense of trust in what their parents are trying to do as a family, that they're essentially becoming separated, and how does that then impact the children? So I know that you work alongside families in relation to supporting children, so that clearly they can go through this process at the rate that clearly the parents need to go through. But it's very difficult if there isn't an emotional support there for the children to be able to go and feel supported by. So again, I guess it's essentially working with a family or working with a couple on their individual needs, which is so important. Yeah.
And it might be mum and dad, or just mum or just dad that needs help. It might be a teenage child who really needs a place to go and talk to someone. And I think that's why the team working works so well, because with different skill sets in place, if there is a child or children who need to have their voice heard or want to have their voice heard, and where parents agree that that's a good step, you know, that sort of team working can really support families and give them that confidence that the professionals helping them know how to do that well, and that they have this trust in the process that is there to support them to do whatever they need to do, reorganize whatever they need to reorganize. So yes, it is right that sometimes from work I'm doing, I'm sending, you know, I'm giving your name to parents, actually not to see the parents sometimes, but to see one of their children or their child. So it actually, I think when we're working with families in a separated situation, either during this really difficult time we've got ongoing at the moment, or more generally, we are connecting early with people, the earlier the better in lots of ways, and really getting to know and understand what's going on for them, and then being able to put together, to bring together the right help at the right time, and enable them to break the problem down into smaller parts so that they feel it can be managed, because otherwise I think it's just a sense of overwhelm, isn't it?
Absolutely. And tensions are running high as they are. So I think, you know, giving some control back to the couple makes them feel that at least they can take themselves through this process at a pace that suits them. Because I think, you know, the fear is that the legal process will sweep them into a completely different place that they perhaps don't feel ready to go to. And I guess that's the difference between your particular role, in that you're trying to avoid that process of being swept into essentially a legal process that then time isn't their own, and that they are being forced to do things at specific times that perhaps the courts, you know, expect if they were to go down that route, as say for arbitration. So the idea is to really try and tune into the fact that you are there in a more supportive role, and reduce some of these tensions, and part and parcel, I guess, of being in perhaps the same home when actually you have separated from the person that you've been married to or in a relationship to, and then not having anywhere to go to is incredibly difficult. You know, at what point, where do you go with this, you know, and how do you manage the process if you're still in the same house and you can't stand the person that you're with, but you're having to live with them because of COVID? You know,
yeah.
that's incredibly difficult.
Phenomenally difficult. And I think that, you know, I mean, we've talked about this, and you've explored tips and strategies, haven't you, Lindsay, to really help people, to give people guidance, help, support, ideas. At the moment, this is particularly relevant for so many families who are in difficulties because a family is reorganizing and changing its shape, and people are locked down, and that's causing additional tension. People have got financial worries that maybe they didn't have 5 or 6 weeks ago. There's an enormous climate of worry out there, and I mean, I think certainly one of the ideas we plan for in the next session is really to share with you some of those scenarios. So that's something we'll move on to do next time. And I know, you know, you've given this some thought, haven't you, Lindsay?
Absolutely. I think for the purpose of today, in relation to what we're actually covering, and how do we help people try and deal with some of these difficult emotions in regard to this process, I think that the trust issue is still the biggest issue, isn't it? Because actually, if you're trying to create some trust in the process, and with that couple where trust is broken down, you've mentioned this to me before about trying to find these second best places for people to feel more in control of their lives. And I think you mentioned about, you know, where areas they can feel in control of, specifically around the welfare of the children, where they can feel some sense of control and trust in the parenting skills of their ex or estranged partners, and that actually if they can focus that on the, you know, that area of at least trust that process, that they are, you know, looking after their children, and that their parenting skills hasn't changed, and that they will always continue to have that, then that kind of creates an element of trust that perhaps they can think about in relation to where they put their energy.
Yeah, and building trust in a different type of relationship together. So not parents who are a couple who are parenting, but parents who aren't a couple anymore, who are still going to be parenting and need to be able to trust each other if they're going to work collaboratively and cooperatively. And that's what we know, children thrive better if their separated parents can collaborate and cooperate with each other. So yeah, these are all, I mean, the things we're talking about today are really, well, how do we help you if you're in this situation to be able to get good enough trust to be able to do these things, and make these plans together as parents. So yeah, they're interesting, really interesting and really important emotions that we're talking about, and hopefully if you're listening to this, they'll be resonating, and you'll get some ideas from listening to Lindsay and I to share our thoughts about some of the practical issues, some of the emotional issues that crop up for families who are reorganising life. So next time we're going to have a focus on COVID-19 really, and the people who are trying to still share their living space together, and need to be able to work together in some way to get through this very difficult time. So thank you very much for listening, and please do remember to listen to us again when we bring forward our next podcast.
Thank you.